10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
I've got the devil in my heart. I've got his song upon my lips. Bésame, bésame mucho, como si fuera esta noche la última vez. Bésame, bésame mucho. Fly down the stairs and I run to the garden. No trace of my true love is there to be found. Singing to you rely on.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good golly, Miss Molly. Welcome to It's Only Talk and Roll, where we celebrate the music we love and keep alive the flame of classic music of all genres. Today, we are very proud to welcome to the show Anthony Garcia. Sir, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. How are things going for you today?
Great. Just been, I'm finishing up an album right now, so I've been doing the artwork, all the, the logistical background stuff that you have to do to upload art and do all that. So,
all right.
That's
Well,
what I'm doing today.
Now we look forward to hearing about that. I'm assuming that's the guitar album.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, We're definitely going to be hearing about that, sir. But yeah, thank you for joining us. So for those who are not aware out there in the audience, Anthony is a songwriter, guitarist, vocalist, and a classically trained pianist, as we're going to see, based out of Austin, I believe. Anthony?
Yeah.
In the great state of Texas, which I, as everybody knows, I used to live in for a while. Anthony is a versatile multi-instrumentalist and he's steeped in the blues, rock, country, metal, classical, Latin, and just about every other genre that I can think of. You seem to be very adept at turning your hand to, sir. So it's extremely exciting to have you here. Your music has been described as cinematic Americana.
That's right.
Which I cannot argue with in the slightest. I think that's a fantastic description. So welcome to the show, Anthony. We're going to just show a little bit of your stuff shortly. But before then, I'd just like to say hello to my regular wrecking crew of panelists. How are you all, gentlemen?
Fantastic. No complaints. Looking forward to finding out about Anthony's music. I've never heard it, but watching you play that piano at the beginning, that's very cool, man. Very cool.
Yeah, indeed. And so also a great big hello to everybody in the chat. There's a lot of our normal crew are here. Please, everybody, hit the like button, share the stream out, consider subscribing if you're new to the channel. We have a lot of great fun here in these shows. But Lord Thoth is here. Welcome to you, sir. Davina Duckworth, great to see you. Yes, obviously a lot of us were hanging out in the Carrie show today in the chat. I believe the lady herself is here. Music video star, Carrie Smith.
Yeah, that's something else I liked. I was like, yeah, he like me uses his wife in his content. That'll work. I like it.
So great to see you, Kerry. It's awesome to have you in the chat here. Yes, we have Robert Lowry. Welcome to the channel, Robert. Good to see you. We have Lord, did I mention our great Canadian friend, Lord Thoth, again? He's always worth mentioning twice. And him and D. Bud Martin, who's also here, are the great mods for us. We have a few others. We'll be catching up with you guys throughout the show, but thanks all for being here. And as I say, get the stream out. Let's get a nice crowd going for this fantastic guest. It's always great to have an actual artist on the show rather than what we normally do, which is just talking about music. Fun as that is, of course. And I do have to mention that on the channel, of course, is my internet buddy, Darius Münchausen. And Darius has already dropped a $3 Canadian, I'm assuming,
description. Very detailed.
Super sticker, which is the old, as usual, the Devil's Horns, R.I.P. Ronnie James Dio. So thank you for that, Darius. Yes. And of course, you do have to get some kind of video for that. I do love a drummer who's physically in shape and takes care of himself. So when he comes with the cigarette,
hanging out his mouth, you can always tell that's Cheap Trick right there. Yeah.
So anyway,
sounds like George Costanza.
So Anthony, thank you again for joining us. I do want to start off by saying, in case I forget later, because it's a one-man production team here, albeit with the help of my panel, where people can find you.
The best place is my website, anthonygarciamusic.com, which is what looks like you have it pulled up right now.
Yeah.
That's pretty much the best place to go.
Yeah, so it's a great website. It's got links to your music videos, a lot of your music videos, all of which, and where to get the albums, where you can see Anthony playing live. But also you have a YouTube channel as well, Anthony Garcia Music, where a lot of the clips we're going to show today, you can see the full thing on Anthony's YouTube channel. There's some fantastic stuff there, both studio and live performances. And also you can get Anthony on Twitter, which is at NTONE Music.
I like to say it's Anthony with an invisible A.
It is, and it's kind of neat that. So so the music, and we're going to talk about that now, that you've released in the last couple of years, some great stuff. A lot of that, I mean, I got it on iTunes. It's available iTunes, Spotify, I'm assuming Amazon Prime or Amazon Music, and various other places. If you go to the website, you will be able to find how to purchase that music from of Anthony's. So please, everybody, I urge you to go and do that. So so this is actually a picture I got from the Cowboys and Indians interview you did, which is kind of neat because I buy that magazine.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did you notice that they started calling it C&I?
Yeah, they don't want to say the I word, I guess.
Yeah, I know. It was pretty funny.
But it's actually a really neat interview you did. And I think it's at least a couple of years old, though.
That's right. It's a little old.
Yeah, and there was two reasons. Well, one of the reasons you were doing that was because of Acres of Diamonds, which we'll touch on. But I guess one of the first things that one of the things you released in the last few years was, I called it a single, but I'm not sure that's an appropriate term for it. It's the Devil in My Heart song. How would you describe it? Is it a single?
Yeah, I'd say it's a single. I'm going to put it on as soon as I release this guitar album that I've been working on, which will be very soon. I'm going to start very soon on another album, and that's going to be on it. Devil in My Heart will be on it. So I'd say it's a single. Yeah. It was released last October.
Yeah, and it's accompanied by a fantastic music video, which I think sums up the cinematic feel of of the song, and we're going to take a little look at that in a minute. But just tell us a little bit about this song, because I've grown to love it in the last couple of weeks.
Oh, thanks. Well, I think that the basic, I guess, the bed that it would lie upon musically would be what you would call, I guess, like a Western, a Tex-Mex sort of like feel, mixing like Mexican or Latin style rhythms with kind of like, Telecaster blues guitar, maybe even slightly heavier. And the lyrics are tell their own story. But I would say that it's sort of a mix between Americana and kind of Spanish guitar played on an electric, and then with some violin.
Yeah, the guitar particularly has got that twang that I love.
Yeah.
Let's play a little bit of that video. There was a little clip of it in the opening montage, but let's play a little bit more.
Sure.
So you can all have a little taste of this great song.
The devil in my heart, I've got a song upon my lips. Every time she shoots a hit, I've got the devil in my heart. I got the warpath in my blood. I've got the scalps of 50 men. It's hard to stop once you begin, when you got the devil in your heart. Broke my heart and commanded the earth on the day the Spanish came. She took me far into the desert. How can I be the one to blame? She's got the devil in her heart.
Yeah, so can you tell us a little bit about the story then of the song? Because it seems to have, I know you play multiple parts in that video.
Mm-hmm.
Just a little flavor of what the story is about.
So the original, like the song itself, it kind of got its inspiration from the part of Texas where I grew up, which is the Panhandle up in Lubbock near Amarillo.
Yeah.
And that's up there is like it would be the plains part of Texas, which is very flat. It's an elevated above sea level. It's a little cooler than the rest of Texas. It's definitely windier, definitely dustier. There's a bunch of desert out there.
I'm pleased to say I've been there to both Lubbock and Amarillo.
So part of there's a very famous canyon out there called Paradero Canyon, which is beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's just south of Amarillo, about half an hour. And incidentally, that's where the Comanche. So the Comanche were very prominent in that part of Texas, and then they would raid down into central Texas, and they were very strong there for a good 150 to 175 years. Paladero Canyon is where the final group of Comanche that wouldn't go to the reservation in Oklahoma. That's where they had their last stand against the Texas Rangers. So a lot of the song, the tone of it has to do with that. Also the beginning period of the Comanche, or when the Comanche first encountered the Europeans, which was like in 1700s with the Spaniards, the Spaniards couldn't penetrate up into that area because of lack of water, and the Comanche were superior in fighting. And so the Spaniards ended up calling that Comancheria. That's just was just the name of what they called it. So just because they were just like, y'all can have that area. So I'd been reading a lot about the Texas Rangers and a lot about the Comanche, basically just general Texas history. And so that kind of inspired, this battle. Kind of, I guess the literal would be the battle between the Comanches and the hunter and the hunted, the Comanche and the Texas Rangers. And but then it's a spiritual, a battle of good and evil.
Yeah, you played part of a priest at one point, and
right, and so in the video, then it took on a different form. It took on, I guess the priest being the outlaw, because there's at the beginning of the video, there's a wanted poster for the priest, and so the cowboy goes looking for the priest, but the Texas Ranger in the song has a star on his chest. He's the devil, so it's like, I guess it's sort of like we all have the devil, we all have the good and the evil in our hearts, and it's a matter of of we're all capable of that.
There's a battle going on, a struggle. Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about your great band here? That I'm assuming, because I've seen a lot of the videos of you playing live, that this is your live band that you normally work with. Just give us a little bit of an idea about these guys.
Sure. So my violinist Megan, she and I have been playing together the longest, and she's a fantastic classical violinist, and she's been delving into other styles, and so she and I play as in a band and duo often. My bass player Jeremy is he's also our producer. He produced and mastered and mixed and everything the song. So he's kind of the brains behind the operation of the full album that I did, as well as this song.
Yeah.
And he's also a great singer, a very talented musician. The drummer Carrie, we all played together for a couple of years, and we've been playing lately with a drummer from England, actually. So we have a kind of a different drummer now that's going to be doing the dates this year. But our drummer is his name is Graham O'Shea, and like I said, he's from England.
I know you'd Charles Godfrey as well.
Do you know him?
Yeah, just a little bit of some of his bands that he's worked with. He's worked with a couple of modern bands.
So Charles is a guy that has done a lot of engineering for a lot of, I guess, bigger albums like Third Eye Blind, I think, and then he worked at Sonic Ranch in El Paso, and he's done quite a few bigger albums. So he played drums on my album, and he also mixed the songs that he drummed on, and that guy's really great. He's really great. I was very fortunate to have met him. So that's the band, and live, it's so much fun playing with them.
It's a beautiful sound on this song. I mean, I hesitate to say that anything's directly in my wheelhouse, but I'm a big, for want of a better word, and I think the term is pretty good, Americana is a very interesting collection of genres. For me, it's got that beautiful, twangy. There's a Texan sound in this song, I think, as opposed to just a southern country rock. So it's a Texan sound, particularly.
Which is what I love and what I go for, and I love, I guess I'm kind of like not a typical Texan because I'm very proud of my state. After having been away, I've traveled quite a bit here and there, and coming back, I'm proud of a lot of things, and I'm very thankful for a lot of things coming back home. And the music is definitely one of the things that I'm very proud of and very thankful for. There's a great music history here in Texas, and I like to draw those elements into. It seems like growing up, I was trying to escape those elements. That's the last thing I ever wanted to play or have anything to do with was so-called country music.
It's what you're growing up in, and you tend to rebel against things.
Right.
In some ways, but I love that. I do love it's a beautifully produced sound on this song. So I urge everyone to get out there and get a copy of it and check the YouTube video on Anthony's YouTube channel or on his website. Fantastic. We're going to talk a little bit about some of those influences coming up soon, but another Darius, who is on the panel, well, he's dropped off because of connection issues. Thank you, Darius. Appreciate it very much. The super chats do keep me going here. And is
that a euphemism?
It could be a euphemism. Hang out with your twang out. I think it probably is. It's not one I've used before, but there you go.
I'll have to think on that one for a little bit. But that might
be pretty good one. Thank you, Darius, for the $2 super chat.
Darius likes to play with words.
He does. And then also our great friend Salty Traveling Sea, who used to be Salty Texas Sea, who I met in Austin a couple of years ago. 99 cents, and it's a slice of cherry pie. So thank you guys, and you also get a little piece of music.
I'm a dirty white boy. Yeah, I'm dirty white boy. Just a dirty white boy.
Does that happen when there's a super chat?
It does. That's what we do.
Okay. I see. I was the first time that happened, I got real confused. I thought I had switched on some kind of.
It's our way of thanking people for super chatting.
Okay.
I would like to say, Joe, that one was for you because you missed the Foreigner show last
Buddy,
week.
you don't know how mad I was last
We'll do another Foreigner show. I'm still trying to get my friend Wilco to get Lou Graham to come on, so we'll see.
Anthony, he had been talking to me for 9 months about doing a Foreigner show. He finally does it, and we had a storm blow through, and I lost power for 2 days. Couldn't do it with him. And I get power out. I get power back an hour after he goes off the air at 8:15 that night. I was like, I can't believe this. Unbelievable. My favorite band ever, by the way. That's
well, Anthony,
I tried to hold it for you.
Anthony and I had a little exchange on the DMs about one of his favorite songs, which is François Hardy, Tous les garçons et les filles, by François Hardy. Mick Jones, a Foreigner, worked with her for many years in France, and Jimmy Page played the guitar on that track. So,
oh, really? Okay, I didn't know if it was on that track. Okay.
Yeah, he played on a number. Well, he can't remember himself because he played on so many sessions. But so before we go into Acres of Diamonds, because I do want to talk about that album, Davina is saying that Anthony, you lived in Korea. Is that true?
Yes, I did. I lived there for 4 years, from 2009 to 2013. I was an English teacher.
That is incredible because Davina knows I'm heavily into Korean movies and television.
Oh, yeah.
Make a lot of videos and live streams about that stuff. So, Ariso, you know, Habitat.
Yeah.
And
I was trying to escape. I was trying to escape music and drinking alcohol, and I got worse into both of them.
I was going to say you went to one of the countries in the world with the worst alcohol problems.
Oh man, I had no idea. I had no idea.
Yeah, I want to get on to talking about, Devil in My Heart's a fantastic single, but I want to actually talk as well about your album, which I think was released last year.
Yeah, well, no, it was released in 2020. It was released, during the lockdown. So, that kind of I had plans to tour and plans to put this album out and do a release and all that, and that all got postponed. So I went ahead and just released it in like July of 2020. So
so Acres of Diamonds, which I believe is an old novel.
It is.
The title's from, and also a reference to your father, perhaps you mentioned.
No, just mainly the novel, which I've never read, and I actually don't know anything about. I had kind of read something about it like 15 years ago, and but I just grabbed the title. So, and
also at the bottom, the subtitle is Los Grandes Éxitos, the greatest.
Los Grandes Éxitos, yeah, just like it means the greatest hits in Spanish.
Yeah, and this is, I guess, would you call it a culmination of your years of you exploring your styles in songwriting and recording? It's such a beautiful, varied album with all these influences in it.
Yeah, so the album itself, thank you. The album itself is about 9 songs, and they're songs. I think some of them are brand new to the album, and some of them are songs that were recorded previously with other bands or other incarnations of, partnerships that I'd had. And I just decided to give them all kind of a makeover, kind of a facelift, and kind of put them out there under my own name and give them, I guess, a proper, like an update. And so that's why I called it Let's Go Down to Éxitos, like the greatest hits, because it's the greatest hits.
You've been playing some of these live for a number of years, I guess.
Yeah, and they're the songs that in live shows, I mean, independently over years, people would, on breaks or after the show would come up to me and say, I love this song, I love that song, and I had it was just interesting to see which songs mean something to people. So I decided to just put those out. And that's kind of how I work with albums anyways. It's like live shows kind of feed what I record, and then sort of when I record them, it's just for like posterity. It's just to kind
of neat to work them out live over a number of months or years.
Yeah.
Kind of work the kinks out of them in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'd like to shout out to our great friend Brahma Bull. Good to see you, buddy. Howdy, guys at work, but listening and lurking. Glad this pairing came together for this show. Yeah, thanks to Brahma for putting Kerry and I together, and then obviously reaching you through them, Anthony. I appreciate him helping out with that. He's a good guy. We do a hockey show, Bourbon and Boarding, Brahma and I. So
cool.
Not much hockey in the summer though. But yeah, there's so Anima Confusa is also here, and our great friend, lovely lass, and also our great friend WG. Speaking of hockey, his dad went to flight school at Reese Air Force Base near Lubbock back in the 60s. Oh,
wow.
He loves West Texas.
Yeah.
Cool. Good to see you, WG. Yeah, so this album, I know my favorite track I'd probably say is Apparitions, because it's possibly the most rock track on there.
Yeah, thanks, man. Actually, Charles plays drums on that. You're the guy you know.
Yeah, and it's got some pretty, well, I'd call it blistering lead guitar.
Thanks, man.
What did you play that on? Was that on
a Telecaster?
A Telecaster, yeah.
Yeah.
But definitely, if you're a fan of, what I would term Americana, as I am, that mixture of rock, blues, Spanish, folk, it's all in here. It's a kind of a melting pot. There's touches of Crazy Horse, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I've heard that as well.
Yeah.
And also, one of my big influences that I think also touches on this particular song is, well, of course, the classical side of music, but Bach. I try to put a lot of. I actually wrote the violin solo that's on this track. I wrote it out, note for note, and gave it to the violinist.
Oh, nice.
And the thought that I put into that was like, definitely influenced by Bach, and so I kind of tried to mix, all those, like kind of Hendrix, maybe a little bit heavier than Hendrix, and then some Bach, and then of course the Americana songwriter side of it, all into this song.
It's an interesting stew to put together, I find, because you may get a lot of Americana acts, and I do love, more recent ones like Ryan Bingham. I don't think the classical element is mixed in with those guys.
Maybe not, and which I think is a great reason why Megan and I are great together, because we both have that background from classical music, and but then we also kind of want to reach and branch out into all these other different styles of and kind of bring them all
together.
You're
saying she plays fiddle and violin? Is that what you
said?
Yes.
She plays country and western.
Well, it's funny you should mention that clip, because we do have that one.
Oh yeah.
Somewhere. Oh, here it is.
What kind of music do you usually have here?
Oh, we got both kinds. We got country and western.
See, the chat didn't have to super chat to get that one. They just got it for free. Yeah. So I'd like to play another little clip. This is from the music video from Santa Rosa, which again is on your website and on your YouTube channel. Let's have a little taste of that video.
And the rivers are frozen this time of year, and I'm sitting on the bank waiting for the boatman to come take me back to the land of the living. I'm gone. We're making bonfires down in Bodega Bay, down in the hideout coves, drinking red wine, watching the tide rolling down to old Mexico. I'm gone. Oh, Santa Rosa.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful taste of that. So there's a very, very gorgeous lady in that video. That's just possibly a little more on the sort of singer-songwriter country rock. And I know you're a big fan, and we're going to talk about all your influences later of Townes Van Zandt. I actually hear a little bit of John Prine in some of this album. I'm not sure if you're a John Prine guy. But
yeah,
it's
I mean,
that kind of storytelling.
Got a little bit of Johnny Cash out of that.
Oh yeah, a little bit of Johnny Cash. I can hear these influences there. I do like the stories you're telling.
Yeah, storytelling and music is fantastic, man. I can't remember the country guy I used to dig that he did Tulsa Time. Who did that song?
That was J.G. Cale. J.G. Cale.
No.
J.G. Cale, Tulsa Time?
No.
I know you're talking about. I don't know who wrote it though.
You know who I'm talking about. He did nothing but tell stories. But that is fantastic kind of music making right there.
Sorry. You're right. I'm thinking of something else. I'm thinking of an Eric Clapton song they did where he covered J.J. Kill. This is Don Williams. Yeah.
Yeah, Don Williams. That's my man right there. Yeah. He was a big time storyteller. Love that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. So I would urge everyone to check out the album Acres of Diamonds. It's, I guess I'd call it a beautiful album. It's beautiful. It's atmospheric. It's got that cinematic feel that was mentioned. Is that something you just feel comes naturally to you, or are you kind of thinking about that when you're writing a song?
It does, and it's I think it has a lot to do with listening to being a fan of, I guess, classical music, you might call it. Telling the story with music as well as the words. Sometimes the music is its own character, as opposed to just strumming along some chords to some words. I feel like the music, tells its own story, takes on a life of its own, and to me that's also, as important as the words. Sometimes more important than the words.
Yeah, I mean, you can create an atmosphere with the lyrics, but also with the arrangement. And I think Santa Rosa there is an absolutely beautiful arrangement. It leaves, for me, and forgive me for editorializing, because it's your music, sir. You know exactly what you're doing in it. I feel it leaves a lot of space for all of the instruments in there. Yeah, which I like. I mean, it's not trying to outpace itself. Leaving room to breathe, and it's a gorgeous track. That's not to say that some of the other tracks, a couple of them, you rock it up quite a bit. So, so the wonderful Kerry Smith of Deprogrammed with Kerry Smith. Kerry, thank you very much. Has left a $19.99 super chat. Thank you. I do appreciate that very much. She says she's sweet on this guest. I wonder why. What are some of your favorite artists and bands? Asking the whole panel. So, because we're going to talk about some of yours in a minute, Anthony, and we will just talk about ours in a second. Thank you, Kerry. Before we talk about that, you also are going to get a clip. From my favorite band. Thank you, Kerry, very much indeed. Appreciate it, and it's been good getting to know you too and planning this show. I don't know. I mean, I could mention a million, and I think some of them I share in common with you, Anthony. I mean, you mentioned. I know we're going to talk about a lot of the metal bands of what we would call the golden era, late 70s, early 80s. But The Who, there's an example for me. The Beatles, The Who. There's millions. I mean, I could go on forever. Cheap Trick. If we were talking Americana, I'd say Graham Parsons and the Flying Burrito Brothers are right up there for me.
It'd be easier to ask him what bands he doesn't.
Well, exactly. I'm a big Graham Parsons fan. That's the formative of my country rock Americana learning. Was a lot of that was the Flying Burrito Brothers and Graham Parsons and Chris Hillman. And also Bernie Leadon, who went on to be in the best version of a band that Kerry warned me not to talk about. But, but I do love Bernie Leadon.
Yeah, we can talk about anything.
Yeah. John, what's yours? Kerry was asking.
What genre?
Oh, I don't know.
You have to pick a genre before I can pick.
Let's say singer-songwriter.
I'd have to say Bob Dylan.
Okay, who's very firmly a formative Americana guy. Absolutely, good choice. Joe,
for Americana, I would say it's all about Texas, really, for me too. It's the Eagles and those guys. Actually, the artist they started with, basically, Linda Ronstadt, and also ZZ Top. I mean, a lot of that stuff. I love all of that stuff.
The Top are legendary, absolutely. One of my favorite bands of all time.
And when you were talking about mixing the classical in with things, I mean, earlier, I didn't get a chance to say something about that. You know, one thing you notice when you watch a great film, if it's got a bad soundtrack, it's not going to be the same. I mean, John Williams has proved that you can take music and elevate a film to a different level. You know, it's a character in the story kind of thing. So, yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. So that leaves our resident black metal fan.
Yeah, I really don't do Americana. Considering like 95% of the bands I listen to are not American.
Yeah. Give us a name.
I will say I do like Johnny Cash. That's one of the very few country artists that I do like.
Man in
Country
Black
music is generally on my list of do not touch.
Yeah.
I will say though, Anthony, I do like your sound. It's not your typical twangy country, so I can tolerate it.
Say that again, Imperitus. Yeah,
that's the high praise from Imp, you know, Anthony. That's high praise.
I don't mean that in a negative way either. Yeah. It's just I can't do twangy country at all, and you have that more, almost more of a folk, not a country sound.
Yeah, well, folk is a big part of the Americana experience. I mean, it's about that melange of rock, blues, jazz, folk, country. It's all in there, and Latin. It's all in there somewhere. Kerry mentioned Waylon Jennings. It's another one of my favorites because I'm an old country guy, but I like old country mainly. But I did want to talk about Acres of Diamonds. Please, everybody, check it out. Somebody asked, is it on physical media, Anthony, or just digital?
Yeah, I've got some CDs sitting in a box right over here.
Get in touch with you through your website if
that's probably the best way to do it. Just actually probably going online and just streaming it's probably the easiest way for people to listen to it.
Well, I've been trying to place where I feel that Devil in My Heart and Santa Rosa go in my music atlas. And I'm sitting here thinking that sounds like something I'd listen to from a Quentin Tarantino movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I hear that quite often. I get that it would be kind of like a Western sort of like a Fistful of Dollars kind of style, which is what I love. You know, it paints that landscape sort of like the Coen Brothers or something like that. Like the oh, what's that movie?
The No Country for Old Men.
No Country for Old Men, right?
That's right. Cormac McCarthy.
I love that movie. I love that movie. I just blanked on the name.
Not to sound weird, it also sounds like something from the True Blood soundtrack.
Yeah, they would play something like that on there, no doubt.
Yeah, I think it fits quite well into for me. I mean, I've got a ton of stuff that I would say that Anthony, your sound goes along with. Maybe some of the more recent guys would be Steve Earle or Drive-By Truckers, Wilco, the Jayhawks, and maybe a little less rock than some of those. But
it's interesting what Imperitus was saying. Because I'm sure you've heard of the band called Swans.
Actually, I haven't.
Oh, okay. So they're I think you'd really be interested in them because they're I think they're like a 5 or 6 piece. They all wear cowboy hats, and they've got this real dusty, gritty sound, but they're like, man, they're dark. They're not country. They're not country. I mean, they're super like, I mean,
they're trying to throw you off with that name, aren't they? Yeah.
They're real.
Joe will do the same to you.
Swan Dive, maybe.
But anyways, that would be a really great. The point though is that is music that would be kind of really that would be perfect for something like No Country for Old Men, which just I mean, just a super
dark
but
novel.
with that Americana undertone, but with also some very heavy elements to it.
Yeah,
you know.
I do know that in the C&I interview.
Oh yeah,
the interviewer said if Ennio Morricone and Dwight Yoakam scored a contemporary western, that would be Devil in My Heart. So, and I think that's a fair comparison. I think that is in there. That there is a touch of your music is a touch of the Ennio Morricone's, I would say, in terms of impact or feel.
Yeah.
So something else you're doing though, and it's going to drop very soon, is a new guitar album, and it is going to be called Guitar Album, I think.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about this.
So this particular album is 8 tracks that I just recorded, and 6 of them are my own pieces. I guess it would be like they're instrumental, and it would be along the lines of like Spanish, I guess, quote unquote flamenco style guitar playing. I'm not a flamenco guitar player. I would never claim to be a flamenco guitarist, but it's certainly inspired by that style. I think people who have, a general knowledge of or basic knowledge of flamenco music, or maybe a superficial relation with it, might consider it flamenco, although it's not at all. But it draws inspiration from that style. And I also play a couple of like traditional Spanish songs. One of them entitled Malagueña is going to be on there, that I always play live. And it gets pretty insane and pretty involved and kind of a little crazy at the end. And then, along with another bolero. So it's basically kind of, and then some of the pieces that I wrote are about, they have titles of people in my life who, were important, like my grandmother and my great aunt. And then a friend of mine who passed away a couple of years ago. So that kind of thing. Again, there's no words to these songs, but the titles are, names of people who have been in my life, and just sort of a dedication sort of to family and friends.
What I found is, I think you're right to make a distinction in that flamenco is only one part of Spanish guitar heritage.
Mm-hmm.
It's a particular style there's a lot of Spanish instrumental music with Spanish classical guitar that isn't flamenco.
Yeah. And I'm coming at it from along the lines of, like if there's a, if there's a small fire in my kitchen and I put it out, that doesn't make me a firefighter.
That's right.
Just because I play a little bit of some Spanish licks, that doesn't make me a flamenco guitarist. Being a flamenco guitarist, that's a lifestyle. That's something that someone has dedicated their lives to. And I would never disrespect that genre by calling myself that. But I have a lot of influence from some great classical players. Flamenco players who I love and respect. And
well, you mentioned Paco de Lucia.
Yeah, Paco de Lucia is probably the first. He was the first flamenco guitarist to get me into that style.
Yeah.
And if Paco de Lucia is one of them, I can write his name in the chat. And also a guitarist a generation before him, Sabicas. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. Sabicas was around like the 50s, I want to say, late 40s. And that guy is, I'm not even going to try to describe how good he is. And then there's some newer guys. There's a newer guy. He's probably in his 60s now, but his name's Tomatito. I don't know if y'all ever heard of him, but anyways, there's a bunch of great flamenco players. And they're just random guys that are just on the internet playing flamenco music, and it's incredible.
You shared this album with me, so thank you for that, because it's really gorgeous. Again, just wanted to ask about the instrument you're playing. So what was your main guitar that you used to play these songs, or was there a variety?
So no, there's just two of my main kind of workhorse guitars. One of the ones is that photo that you were showing is, I used it for like the classical. So I have like 2 songs on there that are like classical guitar. They're solo. I wrote them. I got a lot of elements from classical music that I've studied or listened to. But that particular guitar is a guitar I've had since like 1994 or 93. And my dad bought it for me for like $75, when I was starting college. And I've never had another I've never had another classical guitar besides that one, and I probably won't.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
And then I've got a Takamine that I play live, and I just use those two guitars. Nothing special.
Yeah, so you've had that guitar for a long time then, or quite a long time. Yeah.
I've had it for a while. That particular one.
Is it was it mainly acoustic mic'd up, or is it semi-acoustic with a pickup?
No, that one's just an acoustic guitar. That one's just straight up acoustic. There are no electronics in it.
Yeah.
My Takamine that I have, which is a steel string, I have two of them. They're identical. Those both have electronics, and that's what I play live. I plug into it, and I run that through effects and stuff like that, and play that live.
And this is all in your own studio that you're sitting in now?
Yeah, this is it. This is here in this room where I recorded it. And when I play live solo, I do a lot of live looping. So I'll create a rhythm track on the guitar, then I'll create a actual drum pattern, and then sometimes I'll create a faux bass line in the register of the guitar. I don't use any pedals to do an octave below or anything. I just do it all. Let's try to keep it as close to the actual instrument as possible when I'm playing live. So what the challenge was in the studio, it was harder actually than playing it live, because I had to recreate, kind of what I do live, but I had to do it. For example, if I'm playing a live loop, I can just record the loop, which is maybe about, 8 seconds long, and that will just play continuously until I'm ready to finish soloing and go into the next part. Well, in the studio, I actually have to plan that out, and I didn't use a loop pedal. I actually played for the duration of however long.
It's a totally different experience.
And to get a good sound, and then I also did the percussion the same amount of time, and so it just took some time, and so that was a lot of fun. I underestimated the project. I thought it was going to take a lot less time than it did, just because I was like, oh, this is easy. This is something I do live all the time.
That looping thing, did it take you a while to get used to doing that live, or did you pick that up pretty quick?
It did. And I started doing it back in 2006, and just because it looked cool, and now it's something that I use regularly. Again, I try to use it sparsely. I try not to rely on it as a crutch. I try not to let it overshadow the overall musicality of the moment.
Is this generally when you're playing solo, though, as opposed to in the band? Yeah.
And when I'm playing with my violinist, she and I play as a duo, I'll use it. And she has her own pedal board, and she's really good at using that too. So we do a lot of atmospheric stuff. So, but again, we try not to rely on that. We try not to make it too, when I see artists, or when one starts to rely on pedals and effects to compensate for musicianship, it starts to show. And I think it's important to make the musicianship or the moment or what you're trying to communicate musically through your instrument. I think that's more important than
I guess you could
showing off what pedal you have.
I guess you could find yourself being kind of distracted by hitting the right pedal at the right time, as opposed to just playing the song. Yeah,
right.
One guy I saw doing it very successfully is Warren Zevon. He did it really well, that live, that building up of the thing. He didn't do it in every track, just 2 or 3. When he did his solo gigs. I was
talking about a great singer-songwriter. That guy.
Very privileged to see him live once. Yeah, I was very lucky. Thank you, WG, for a $10 super chat. Just purchased and downloaded Anthony's single and Acres of Diamonds.
That's
great
nice
tunes.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing that, WG. Everybody, I recommend you go check them out if it's iTunes, which is unfortunately, is my platform I buy things on. I wish I'd never started on it years ago, but these are brilliant records. Go get them. Thanks, WG, for supporting the channel. I'll have to find something really, really nice for you. Oh yeah, this is it. Possibly the finest clip in my arsenal.
You got to link me that after the show, 70s. I got to show that to someone. I tried looking for it the other day, and I couldn't find it.
It's a guy called Bill McClintock. He's got a YouTube channel.
I saw. I went through his entire channel. I didn't see that one.
All right, maybe I've got a downloaded copy, but anyway, thank you,
another one with Freeze, but not that one.
Yeah, thank you, WG, for that. So the guitar album's coming out in August. I'm assuming through the normal digital channels, yeah?
Right. Through all the
Great.
regular places you can get music.
Looking forward to that, sir. So, yeah, we talked about some of your influences, and with your indulgence, I'd like to go back and just talk a little bit more about some of those, if you're up for that.
Absolutely.
Said you were born in Lubbock, so
yeah,
obviously you're well.
No, I was born in Dallas. I was born outside of Dallas, but I grew up in Lubbock.
Grew up in Lubbock, yeah. So
that's the man right there.
Rock and roll town, obviously.
Yeah.
With Buddy Holly coming from a dry town as well. Dry county.
Yeah. It's not dry anymore, but it was growing up.
It was, yeah.
And there's some great stories about, growing up, not being able to get alcohol in town and stuff like that.
Well, that's why they had a lot of DUIs,
yeah.
But another guy that came from there was Bobby Keys.
Bobby Keys, man. He came from Slayton, which is actually about 20 minutes outside of Lubbock.
Yeah, obviously played with the Stones and all sorts of guys like that. So it's a place. How long did you live there? I mean, did you live there for quite a while?
Yeah, I mean, my parents are they met in Dallas in the 60s and lived out there. And so I was born in Irving, which is just in between Dallas and Fort Worth.
That's where my office was. I worked in when I lived there in Irving.
My dad got transferred out. He was with General Motors. He got transferred out to West Texas in Lubbock in 1978. And so I went to preschool, all the way preschool, kindergarten, all the way through grade school, all the way through high school, and all the way through college. Went to Texas Tech University, which is in Lubbock. And so I was there. Of course, I left for some small periods of time, but came back, during those times. And then, so Lubbock's my home. It's where I grew up.
Yeah. Well,
I don't live there now, but
it's got that great rock and roll history. I mean, with those two guys,
it really does. And there's some other great musicians as well. There's wonderful musicians that perform there now. And the thing that I love about Lubbock is, you have a city like Austin, for example, or like New York or Los Angeles or Nashville, which is a hub. There's an industry there, and you have people that come to those cities who are wonderful musicians from other small towns to make their way in the industry and to find other like-minded musicians. But Lubbock, you're going to go out on a Tuesday night or Monday night, and the live music you're going to hear is they all grew up there, they all went to high school there, and they're all ages, and you're going to go, any bar you go to on a given night, you're going to hear good music.
And a ton of different influences in that area, I guess, as well. And Amarillo, you mentioned, I've been there too, the Cadillac range. A lot of music there too. But I guess you're in Austin now, so as you say, it's a hub. I think Austin's almost become too big for its own.
Yeah, actually, outside of Austin, but I lived in Austin for about 6 years, and have kind of left there. I don't really play there anymore. I don't really do anything there anymore, unless it's like a private event or something like that. Austin is. To keep my complaining about Austin to brief. I don't want to bore anyone, but basically you can't make any money there. No, it's there's a lot of musicians, it's a lot of saturation and
saturated. It's
so saturated, and it's there are a lot of people moving from other states to driving up the price of the cost of living, which is making it more difficult for artists and musicians to live there. So I kind of made the decision, I guess gradually. I didn't put my foot down or anything like that, but I just sort of over time have decided it's just not really worth going there. It costs more to park my vehicle than it does than the money I make when I play there. I don't need to put it on my website and look cool for playing in Austin. So I do a lot of gigs outside of town.
I think you did one at Looking Back the other day, didn't you? Or recently?
Yes.
That's a great place.
It is. It really is. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful.
Special.
It's just from an artist standpoint of playing there, it's wonderful.
With Willie and Waylon and the boys.
You beat me to it, Brian.
Yeah, great place. I know Austin. When I lived in Dallas, you could see the same bands in Deep Ellum in Dallas for half the price and without the lineup. So that's just a personal observation. But one thing that is fascinating about you that you wouldn't necessarily think is that you're a classically trained pianist.
Yes.
Am I right in saying? How did you get into that?
Well, so I guess how I initially got into it. I guess going back, if we're gonna, I guess, do a little bit of biography or just about how music in general. If that's okay, I'm not sure if we're.
We're at your disposal, sir, as long as you want to take. Yeah.
So once upon a time,
back in the day,
growing up, I listened to a lot of, I guess, metal, or that was what got me into music was playing, or what got me into guitar. I started guitar when I was about 12. Started piano when I was about 7, just because my neighbors were into piano, and I just kind of went over there and picked what they were playing the Star Wars theme or whatever, and then I would pick songs up off movies and stuff by my parents were watching by ear, and so I was kind of interested in music. I kind of felt like I had some kind of a gift for music at that point. And then when I was about 11, I heard Iron Maiden for the first time, and then as a result, heard several other musicians. This must have been around, I guess, 1984, around that time, 83. Of course, we know the album that came out in 1984 that revolutionized guitar playing. Of course, I got really into Van Halen. I got into a bunch of stuff like that. So,
Maiden.
So, Wasted Years was the song that did it for me. I'm sure y'all know that song, but that was.
Oh God, yeah.
I heard that riff at my friend's house, and I was like, I got to play that, whatever that riff was, just that there. And so, anyways. I got into a lot of metal and a lot of things like that. That was the music that I was into from the time I was about 11 till I was about 17. I played in a lot of bands. I was just sitting in my room for hours with the tape player and going back and hit rewind and learning all the licks, Guitar Player magazine. So then one day my dad, for Christmas, he got me a gift, which was a Sony Walkman, which back in about 1989 or 1990, 1989, that was the latest technology.
Oh yeah.
And as a joke with the Sony Walkman, he got me a cassette of the best of Bach, because that was like the last kind of music that I would ever listen to was classical music, because I had long hair and I was earrings and I was smoking pot, and they didn't know I was smoking pot, but I was doing a lot of things, a lot of the rock and roll kind of things.
Just what the classical composers all did too. They did.
Well, I didn't know that at the time because I was 17 and I had and I was very kind of one gear, I was like, play fast, play loud, and then start over and do it again. That's play loud, play fast, play loud, play fast, play loud. What, there's other people in the band? I didn't know. It's just like, you're 17 years old guitar player. You're going to play loud and play fast. Oh, yeah. And so then he gave me that cassette on Christmas Day, and we had a laugh. That was pretty funny. And I went to my room and put the headphones on and hit play. And I listened over and over and over and over again to this, because what I could feel at the time, that I didn't, I guess, intellectually understand until much later, until I actually started studying what music was and music theory and the nuts and bolts of it and the mathematics of music and the science of music, was that there was a lot of harmonic similarities. There were a lot of harmonic similarities between, I guess, metal or the music that I was into, and particularly Johann Sebastian Bach. And one of the pieces on there was, of course, Toccata and Fugue, because it was the best of Bach, the D minor Prelude and Fugue, and then his famous A minor violin concerto. And both of those just really spoke to me because of the harmonic minor stuff that happens on there. For people that know, I'm sure y'all know music theory, but there's a lot of that happens in minor music, and particularly happens in a lot of Bach's music. So that it really kind of scratched an itch that I didn't realize was there. And so I really got into that music. Then around the same time, Amadeus came out, the movie. And like you said earlier,
it was rock and roll. Amadeus was rock and roll.
Those composers were basically rock stars without electricity. And so I really got into that movie, and I got into the idea that Mozart was, particularly of the great three composers, Beethoven, Bach, and Mozart. Mozart was particularly rebellious against everything, not just against his father, not just against the Archduke of Salzburg and all that stuff, but he was particularly rebellious against the system, about the musicians being the servant, musicians being hired help, the ones
because of the sponsorship they had to have. Yeah,
right. A lot of times the musicians were employed by the aristocracy, and they lived with the aristocracy, and they were just the servant. They were like a cook. They were like, the gardener, and they would come out and play their composition with the orchestra for the dinner, or they would just play it privately for whoever the aristocracy was. So he wanted to get away from that, and he wanted to go write operas, and he wanted to go freelance in Vienna, which was a big problem for his dad. So I sensed that rebelliousness in him at that time, and that really spoke to me, especially in addition to him being this incredible musical genius that could just floor anybody with his ability. I really loved that at that time. That really spoke to me because I kind of wanted to be able to wave a magic wand with the guitar and do that to people too. That was what I wanted to do back then. And so to answer your question, that's how I got it.
And it made you want to study musical theory then?
Well, it made me realize that there's a whole other world of music out there that I didn't even realize was happening. Yeah. And I wouldn't say that that's what made me want to study music theory, because I never really wanted to study music theory. I don't know really anybody that does, except for nerds. No, just kidding. No, except for people that that want to teach it. I still don't really like music theory, but I know it. But
it has its uses, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. It's a tool that I'm glad I learned how to use. But
it did lead you to playing this fantastic classical piano, which I'd love to show a clip of if you don't mind. Yeah,
of course.
This is one of the Bach pieces. Nice, very nice. What particular piece? What is that one?
That's one of the two-part inventions. They're called inventions. There were studies that he wrote for his son. He wrote 15 two-part, meaning two voices, two contrapuntal voices, and then he wrote a series of 15 with three, and they were basically, like I said, for his son, in order to teach him how to play independently, how to play voices independently.
Yeah, it's interesting though when you do listen to that, and there is the structural side of some classical music like Bach. You can hear that in a lot of metal too, as you were saying. Mm-hmm. There's a structure and a way of switching between major and minor and all these other things that, which is why I know Imp is into a lot of the symphonic black metal, which there is a grandeur to some metal which fits very well with classical. So interesting that you picked that up at the time, because I'm not sure I would have been mature enough to do that.
I got a question for you.
Mozart, of course.
What instrument do you write on? I mean, seeing how good you are with a piano, do you write on a piano? Do you write on the guitar? What do you write with?
A lot of times I just write. I don't really use the instrument a lot of times. So I think writing that's a good question, because some of the pieces, like for example on this guitar album I'm about to put out, they're just almost like sound check pieces. Like when you're playing a 3-hour gig, like the first half hour tends to be warming up, or tends to be like just kind of messing around, or like if I'm playing a really boring gig that it's kind of in the background, I'll just make pieces up and then I kind of remember them. That's one way of composition to me. It just kind of happens gradually, and then this song appears that it's sort of like it's always just been there, kind of. And then there's the other side of it where I'll have an idea and I won't maybe even necessarily be around an instrument. Maybe I'll be doing another task, like I'll be mowing the yard, or I'll be painting, or I'll be driving or working out or something. And I'll just let it I'll make sure I'll be very careful not to have any headphones on or be around any other music. because I don't want that to influence what I'm
right. You want it to be coming from you, not being influenced by an outside source. Yeah. Gotcha.
Well, and also don't want to forget what I'm
exactly.
What I'm doing, but yeah, that's another way that I write. I mean, one of the pieces I was kind of under the gun for this last album that I did, and one of the tracks on there, it's interesting. I was kind of stressed out about it because I hadn't really written it yet, quote unquote. And I was just like laying in bed one day, and I was like, I'm just gonna sit here and write it. I'm just gonna lay in bed and like just kind of think about what I've got. And thankfully, because I have music theory, I can remember not only the chord progressions and the chord structure, but I can remember the solfege and I can remember the melody. It gives me a way. It gives me a method to systematically organize, musical ideas and to remember them rather than having to actually physically write them down on paper or something like that. Also, the piano's the same way too. Sometimes I'll just be messing around the piano for a long time and something will just kind of come to me. But
yeah, I know you've. There's a lot of great videos on your website of the classical pieces. I love the Satie as well. The whistling at this, because I love that piece of music. I can never pronounce it.
Yeah. I can't either. It's like a made up word. He made it. He made that word up. It's just like he was kind of an interesting character. It was part of his cult. He started a cult.
I've got a whole album by Steve Hackett of that stuff. But go ahead. Anthony.
I've actually wanted to do a whistle album. And I've actually kind of started it and I have several recordings, that being one of them. But just where I'm taking classical pieces or pieces that were written for piano and taking the left hand, playing left hand on the guitar, and then whistling the melody, and making that sort of it's sort of like this, this kind of Clint Eastwood sort of vibe, Clint Eastwood movie kind of vibe.
Can't be easy to whistle and play the guitar at the same time though.
I guess it's not that hard for me. I mean, I'm not saying I do it great, but it's not that.
Well, I do like that particular track or the video that you made, because I do like that piece of music. And as I say, Steve Hackett of Genesis did an entire album of that. He didn't whistle at the same time though. He just
Satie is one of those guys, man. Like I'm sorry. Well, yeah, he was just an eccentric person, but he was let's see here. I guess he was in the church for a while. He was also part of the Gnostics. There was a big Gnostic people around the turn of the century in Paris. And he just was sort of an obstinate, sort of difficult person to get along with. He didn't really like people. So he ended up
La Belle Epoque and all that weirdness in Paris at that time.
So he ended up making his own cult, and then he made himself like the priest of his cult, and he was the only member of it. And he ended up making up these different words. And the Gnostienne, which is a part of a Greek word that's been, sort of, I guess, morphed into French a little bit. He decided to write a set of pieces based around that.
It's a beautiful hunting piece. Yeah.
All his music it's just so sparse, and he's one of those guys that's very interesting too musically, because he didn't start studying music until he was in his 40s. He at the urging of Claude Debussy, the great French composer,
he's a great composer. Yeah,
right. They were friends, and Debussy at the time, who for people listening who might not know who he is, he wrote like Clair de Lune. He wrote The Afternoon of a Faun. He wrote a lot of very dreamy music, and was very popular in his day. He was friends with Satie and encouraged Satie to continue composing. He even orchestrated a lot of Satie's music. And at Debussy's urging, he attended the Conservatory of Paris in his 40s with all these kids that were like 17, 18 years old. And I think it maybe ended up helping his composition. But the point of that is that his compositional style is very sparse and minimalistic, and comes from his true nature of what he was grasping for. He just intuitively heard this music in his head, reached for it, and tried to communicate it through his instrument instead of
reaching for another world, in a sense.
Right, instead of trying to intellectualize it and prove some sort of musical formula, scientific formula of some kind.
I mean, it's a beautiful piece though, and you play it and whistle it beautifully. And Debussy's brilliant. Steve Hackett did an entire Debussy as well. But,
cool.
Yes. He's one of my favorite guitarists, Steve Hackett of Genesis, but he does a lot of acoustic classical stuff as well. He's really good. So the classical piece is a big part, but you've also a huge influence for you, and for he's been mentioned already, is the Man in Black.
Yeah, man. Johnny Cash is huge. Actually, incidentally, I just finished a really great biography about him, and it was very eye opening. I didn't know a lot about him, but his music, him and Willie Nelson are probably my hugest, like, I guess, country influences. I mean, I love other country artists, but I would say they're both rebellious in their own ways.
Oh yeah, definitely. And their music doesn't sound like most other country music. It really doesn't.
Yeah,
I mean, the Man in Black's almost borders on rock and roll. It really does. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because he was the second artist to come out of Sun Records after Elvis. So Elvis was the first artist that Sam Phillips discovered and really promoted and really hit. And he and Johnny Cash were basically, I mean, Johnny Cash was right behind him. Also, obviously, stylistically, they really weren't at the beginning too far away from each other. Elvis was doing a lot of gospel songs. He wanted to do a lot of gospel songs. He was doing rockabilly before it really became rock and roll. And
I love those old Sun sessions of Elvis's and the Sun sessions of Johnny Cash. The beautiful sound that came out, and they were just 3 pieces as well. Both of them were just 3-piece bands.
Yeah.
Johnny Cash and the Tennessee Trio, and
the Tennessee Two. Yeah, it's so funny too, because the interesting thing about Cash is that I didn't realize there was this period of his life where he rose, and when he went into Sun Records, he was really put under the gun. He was really put under the pressure cooker to be creative, and that's when he came out with. He wrote "Walk the Line," and even before that, he wrote a song called "Oh Porter," which was one of his first.
Hey Porter,
one of his first songs, and then maybe it was "Hey Porter." Sorry,
great song.
And all of those were towards the beginning. Even "Folsom Prison," which he actually didn't come up. He actually took another song that was called "Crescent City." The words were almost identical. He changed a couple of ideas and a couple of lines and made it "Folsom Prison." He made it more dangerous. Slightly more dangerous by saying, I killed a man in Reno just to watch him die. I mean, that wasn't, but that was a different line in that Crescent City song. And the Crescent City song was almost like a jazz standard that was sung by a female. So he ended up having to pay later on in the late 70s. He had to pay off the writer of that song back royalties.
I didn't know that.
He gave him a flat payment of $75,000.
Did not know that.
Yeah, I didn't either until I read this book. And but
I've read the Sam Phillips books, and I've read the Elvis books.
Have you read the Sam Phillips, the one with the orange cover, the Sam Phillips biography? Yeah, that's an incredible book. But Johnny Cash had this. He's an artist that you really look at, and he's a really great example for an artist needing to continually be hungry and continue to push themselves and continue to recreate themselves. Because what happened was at the beginning of his career, like I said, he had Walk the Line, he had these hits at the beginning. And then he kind of just was floundering, and then he had Man in Black, and he got lazy, and he wanted to start making gospel albums, and so he ended up going over to I believe it was Mercury after he left Sun, and his albums, just the quality of and his desire to be a good artist, it just went to the wayside. He created like 30 albums that were very lackluster. The public didn't really accept
30 albums.
Something like that. Yeah, it was quite a few albums, and nobody was really in the studio pushing him like Sam Phillips did. And he was just as a result, he was putting out albums of music that weren't even his songs. There were some songs that came out like Jackson, like Ring of Fire, but June Carter, his wife, wrote those.
Yeah, she was
and it wasn't until the end when he met Rick Rubin that Rick Rubin was the person who sat him down and was like, "Play me a song. And we're going to have this honest relationship, and I'm not going to BS you. You're not going to BS me. And we're going to just make an honest music." And they made those 6 American albums at the end of his life. And that's when he wrote When the Man Comes Around. And that's like such a great, you could see him as an artist pouring over his art again. And really like what Leonard Cohen calls it. He calls it going down into the trenches, because it's not pretty. It's, to me, that process of creativity, that process of songwriting is just such. I look at it like when you're really hungry and you want to get a pizza and a tub of ice cream and watch your favorite movie and sit around in your boxers and you just want to be alone. You want to just veg out. You don't want anybody to see that, right? you don't want to be on camera. Well, that's what it's like going, except it's more of like a torture in a way when you're going down into that creative, because you're risking something. You're risking failure. You're risking your vulnerability. And it's sort of like there's no one there to tell you if this sounds good or if these words are stupid. Or
you're putting it all out there.
You're
putting it all out there. Your whole
inner
being.
I think he was, in his career, he really only did it at the beginning and at the end. And in the middle, there was just this lull. And I think at the end, he reached not only like spiritual redemption and redemption within himself and kicking pills and all those things, like the actual literal redemption, but he also achieved artistic redemption because he became honest with himself again. And he allowed himself to go down into the trenches again and really face himself and to create.
We all know the influence that Elvis had, but I think Johnny Cash is almost equally important. It certainly is when it comes to the country singer-songwriter and the singer-songwriter. He made the singer-songwriter genre, which obviously Bob Dylan from folk came out after that. But Johnny Cash is probably as seminal as Elvis, in my opinion, in a different way.
It's interesting that you say that because Johnny Cash and Bob Dylan were great friends. They were great friends, and they both had such respect for each other artistically.
They
collaborated.
Sorry, mate. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was just saying they obviously collaborated on an album, Nashville Skyline, which is a pretty good album. It's not either of their best moments, but it's cool to hear them both singing together.
It's the first one you can hear Bob Dylan singing on, though.
Well, he sings in that weird voice, like and he intentionally did that to be weird. And he even says it in interviews. He's like, "Yeah, I was just trying." He sounds like Grover, like he sings in that voice, just to be different. I'm not really sure. And then they did a couple of, but it's cool to hear them perform together. But
girl from the North Country,
But you're right. Dylan was hugely influenced by.
Cash was seminal. If Elvis was seminal as a modern rock and roll vocalist, Johnny Cash was the creator of the modern country rock.
Right. Well, he was the first one to come out and really, writing his own songs. And Buddy Holly as well. We can't forget that Buddy Holly was writing his own songs.
Buddy Holly, man, when we lost him, that guy, he was so far ahead of everybody else. I mean, as an influence of you, I could really read that because he was one of the first guys to use orchestral pieces in his music.
Right.
Ballads and stuff,
brilliant producer. He would have been. Imagine what he would have achieved if he'd lived.
I mean, if he'd lived, the kind of music he'd put out, it would have been amazing.
And the Beatles called themselves the Beatles to ape the Crickets. So,
I wanted to actually mention something because speaking of all this orchestral stuff, and you mentioned Buddy Holly's late period of getting into when he was living in New York towards the end of his life, and he was really putting on the production hat. And he was really starting to get into, string arrangements, and he was 22. That's what's amazing too.
This had never been done before. The artist was never allowed to produce his own music ever.
Multi-tracking on tape in the time.
And I didn't get into Buddy Holly. I didn't get into that part of his career until I was, already in my 20s. But one artist I didn't mention before, and my influences as we were preparing for the show, was the Beatles, and they were the first group that showed me. I guess they were the biggest eye opener for me because they were the group that showed me that you can take this rock and roll style, and then you can take this orchestral style, and you can take all these different styles, and you can kind of pick from them. You don't have to master them, but you can spend some time here, spend some time here, spend a little time here, spend a little time here, and just kind of bring them all together and put them and dress up your song with it. And that's what was the biggest influence to me.
Take what you like and use it.
And you don't have to be a master at all of them, but that's what I love about the Beatles. They were, particularly with Sgt. Pepper's, which was the first Beatles album I ever heard. One of my friends, it was in the summertime, and it was in high school, and I had never taken LSD, and we had some LSD, and he's like, "Hey man," so we dropped some acid and started smoking some weed, and he was like,
"And listen to Yellow Submarine." No, I'm just kidding.
Well, no, he pulled out Sgt. Pepper's, and he was like, "We're gonna listen to this Beatles album," and I was like, "What?" It's like, to me at the time, the Beatles were just this old people music. I Want to Hold Your Hand. Like I didn't know anything about the Beatles. And before he put it on, he said, "We're gonna listen to this album like we're watching a movie." And I was like, "Okay." And I was like, "This ought to be a real hoot." And he puts he puts the album on, and I mean, I didn't even need to be on LSD to understand that, for it to hit me like it did, but it was even compounded by
the genius of George Martin as well. The genius of George Martin.
I mean, I'm a massive Beatles fan. I've read almost every book you can find on them, and their influences.
Have you got, Anthony, the complete Beatles recordings by Mark Lewison?
No, I don't.
You got to read a copy of that. It's a day-by-day account of every recording session they ever did, and it's like a novel unfolding as they.
I have a feeling we could probably nerd out on Beatles for like a whole 5 hours.
Probably could, better not. But yeah, we'll circle back.
Yeah,
circle back.
But that's, I forgot to mention that. And I didn't. I kind of felt like that was a little obvious to mention that, and I didn't. But they were the first group to really. And again, of course, drawing their influence from Buddy Holly, and then going back to Johnny Cash and Buddy Holly and Elvis, the first tour that they did together, that Elvis did before he really hit, when he was still doing the Louisiana Hayride and Sam Phillips was still pushing him, and he was Johnny Cash was just coming out. They did a tour, and they ended up in Lubbock, where Buddy Holly opened for them at Lubbock High School, which is where I went to school. But anyway, so that was a really cool part of that side of history of rock and roll.
I mean, we forget just how important that was. Those Sun Studios and those sessions there, and you saw the four guys, Carl Perkins and Jerry Lee Lewis and Cash. It's so important, and yet many generations now don't even know about that stuff. I mean, have you ever been? I've been in that studio.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, when you stand on that X on the tape where Elvis stood, it's like a spiritual experience, Little room, tiny little room.
It's tiny, and it's really cool. It's really wonderful. You're right. Memphis in general is like that. I love towns like Memphis that haven't been changed, that haven't. They still have their old, facades, like their old buildings that haven't been torn down and turned into a Starbucks or something. They have the old character, and thank God no one has done that. No one has tried to. To update Sun Studios, because it's such a
that would be a crime. That would be a crime. I think Stax there is the same. You can go to Stax.
Yeah, I went there as well. Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
Which one are you talking about? The one in Nashville or the one in New Orleans? Memphis. Yeah. Okay.
Beale Street is.
I've been to the one in New Orleans. My father took me down there. My senior year in high school in '83. Yeah. It's a pretty cool place.
On your countryside, is Marty Robbins much of an influence at all?
Yeah, I love Marty Robbins. I mean, I'm not too deep into him as an artist, really. I mean, just because I haven't had any time to read about him or anything like that. But Carrie and I were just driving, and we listened to the whole Gunfighter Ballads album. And I play, El Paso, of course. But
El Paso,
I love. I admire his place in the history of his place of where he came and influenced others, and that's a great album too. The Gunfighter Ballads.
It's very cinematic as well. Again, it's back to the cinematic thing.
Yeah,
I did want to interrupt briefly, and we'll come back to the chicken soup. But I wanted to show a little clip of you playing Johnny Cash. So this is Folsom Prison Blues.
I hear the train coming, it's a rolling round the bend, and I ain't seen the sunshine since. I don't know when, but I'm stuck in Folsom Prison, and time keeps dragging on, and that train keeps on rolling all down to San Antonio. Well, when I was just a baby, my mama told me, son, always be a good boy, don't ever play with guns. But I shot a man named Reno just to watch him die. And I hear that whistle blowing, I hang my head back.
So you got the looping going on there.
Yeah.
So this was in Freiburg in Germany, am I right in saying?
Yeah.
And I believe you're going to be going back touring over there again soon, yeah?
Yeah, next month.
Yeah, I mean, do you find that in Germany and Europe in particular, they're a little bit more open to what we would call Americana than they are even in your own country?
I'd say yes, in a sense, in the sense that to them it's still a novelty because it's something that's what do they call it? It's something that some of them have never experienced firsthand. It's something that a lot of people have never been to the United States. So they're very open to all American music, first of all. And in particular, they're open to country music. One of the places that I'm going to, that Carrie and I are going to, the first place we're stopping is Munich. And I have a good friend from there who's a musician. He's German, and he wears a cowboy hat, he wears boots, and he plays Western swing fiddle, he plays pedal steel, He plays guitar, he plays probably better than any musician I've met here in Central Texas, and he's devoted his life to that. And in Munich, there is a very strong rockabilly / country scene. There's a wonderful place in Munich called the Rattlesnake Saloon, and it's almost like the Broken Spoke in Austin. It's just an old saloon with all this memorabilia, pictures of Hank Williams and Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson, and they have country music. They have their own radio station, and they'll be talking in German. They'll be like, "Und dieses nächstes Lied, es kommt aus Texas. And this is Bob Wills. Time changes everything. Yeah, München, Deutschland."
I can testify to that coming from Scotland, and before I moved to Canada. But back in the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s, we ate up every band we could get.
Yeah.
Like it came, and those bands were touring constantly in Britain and Europe, like Jason and the Scorchers, who I love, Georgia Satellites, guys like that. They couldn't get enough of touring in Europe because we loved that stuff. Mm-hmm. And they said, we can't get as big a crowd of this at home. We can't get this crowd at home.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that. I mean, you're coming from another country. And you're, playing. I mean, it's one of our greatest exports is our music, and they love it. They just love it, especially when they get to meet an American, person who sings in their native language. It's really cool.
So you're going back with Carrie. You're going to be doing a few gigs. Was this in August or?
Yeah, middle of August. We're going to go to the band's going with me for the first couple of weeks, and we'll be in Munich, and then we're playing a festival in Switzerland. And then Carrie and I are going back to Freiburg. I have a very good friend of mine that lives in Freiburg.
Nice.
And so we stay with her when we're there. And then we're going to Amsterdam, and I'm playing a couple of dates in Amsterdam. So it's kind of my little route. What's that?
It's great that you're taking the band for a couple of gigs.
Yeah, it is cool. I mean, the only way we can do it is because we get invited to play this festival. We got invited last year, and they pay us enough to cover our plane tickets, thankfully. Yeah. And then, so once you're over there, it's kind of like, I mean, make your way around, find a couple of bar gigs or some other like kind of the ones I do on my own are sort of like smaller venue, like house concert kind of deals. Mm-hmm. So it's like a small venue, but a lot of people are there, and people are very generous with buying albums or giving tips and stuff like that. So it's nice to do small. I like to do. Well, it's not like I have a choice, but I enjoy the smaller venues. Even if I had a choice, I think I would want to still do the small ones because you just get to talk to people and people are so nice and kind and receptive.
That's cool. Any experience of playing in the UK? Not that I live there now, but
No, I've never played there. I haven't been there in a long time, and I've kind of heard that they're very strict about entry and visas for musicians. That they'll really scrutinize you if you come in with a guitar on your back, particularly in England. I mean, that's what I've heard. And I'm just kind of like, I just don't really want to mess with it. I played in Ireland. I mean, I know it's not Kingdom, but it's still the close enough to that part of that part of the world.
They're quickly becoming the censorship capital of the world. That's for sure.
Ireland is.
Yeah.
The UK is what I was speaking of.
Well, anyway, Central Europe still seems to love American music. So
yes.
Yeah. So, conscious of time, and there's a few things that I'd like to talk about which we haven't quite touched. We've talked about the classical and the country, but you did touch on the rock stuff. I mean, obviously you grew up loving rock, as you said. Rock guitar, guys like this guy.
Yeah, of course.
Were you into rock stuff and then kind of looked back on Hendrix, or was that somebody else?
Yeah, for sure. Because like I said, coming up, so I was coming up in '84 was the time that I really like kind of got bit by the metal bug or the rock bug, whatever you want to call that. So I was used to a certain sound coming out of the guitar at that point. I was already used to how the guitar sounded when Eddie Van Halen played it. I was used to the sound of the guitar when, Slash played it, or when, Dave Mustaine played it, or when Metallica was playing, so that was a much different sound than what they were playing. He was playing 20 years earlier. And so I specifically remember, probably when I was about 12 or 13, that I had already been messing around with these other great guitarists, Randy Rhoads, of course, who
Crazy Train. Yep.
Yeah. This particular album you mentioned.
That album is, I'd say that was one of my big eye openers. And it's his sound on that album and who Randy was as a person, and just everything about this album, everything about Randy Rhoads as a guitarist. And you listen to this album today in 2023, his guitar sound, it's not dated, and his technique and his musicianship and the depth of his playing, it's just as influential and just as powerful today in July of 2023 than it was back in 1982 when they recorded the album. And so that was a really big, that was one of those albums that I listened to. I can't even tell you how many times I've heard this album. But that's what I was listening to at the time. And, I remember being on the basketball court and I had my little Walkman with me or some kind of listening device. And a voice in my head said, like, I should listen to Jimi Hendrix. I should listen to him. And so I put on Are You Experienced? I put on the album, Are You Experienced? And I was like, this sucks. That was my first reaction. I was like, his guitar sound.
Well, we're used to metal, and this is a slightly different thing.
Exactly. It's not that he sucked. It's that I was 12 or 13 and I didn't know what I was talking about because I was spoiled. It's like if you're eating McDonald's all your life when you're 12, and then somebody makes you a homemade amazing hamburger. You're not going to know the difference. And I didn't. I was 13. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know anything. But so to answer your question, yes, it was much later that I actually understood who Hendrix was. I understood how much he changed the way the guitar was played, how much he changed entertainment, how much he changed the way the guitar sounded, and his impact on the scene in London when he came there. He just tore the roof off the place.
Interesting that he had to go to London to do that, of course. And I remember reading an article, or an interview. I think it was Pete Townsend when he played at the Marquee, Hendrix, and he was there. Clapton was there, a couple of other guys, and he said, "It's all over for us now.
Yeah, right.
We're done.
Yeah, we're right. Invested. There it is. Yeah.
There's not. What can we do after this? This was like 66 or something, and."
But Hendrix is also just one of those people who he kind of did the whole like melding of two roads. He was a songwriter, which is his songs are overshadowed by his wonderful guitar playing. He's a great songwriter. He was a wonderful songwriter.
Some brilliant stuff.
And you could just take his songs. I've heard people play his songs without the flash on acoustic guitar with just the lyrics, and it's beautiful music. So that's Hendrix is definitely a huge influence.
Revolutionary guy. The welding of because he'd done all that soul stuff with James Brown, and he'd worked in a bunch of bands. He welded all these styles together, and it was groundbreaking because it was an African American guy with Indian, Native American parentage too, lineage too, playing blues, white influenced blues rock in a rock world.
And if you also make that kind of what you're bringing is like the influences of if you like circle all the way back to like what Bach was doing, because they're similar in the sense that Hendrix took the Delta blues, he took all the old black blues music, but he also took something new. He took rock and roll. He took he took the British blues. He took something from America. He took something from England. He took something and made it kind of his own. And that's what Bach was doing back in his day. He took something from the French style. He took something from the Italian style. He took something from the German style, from the English style of playing. There's all these different styles that were happening keyboard wise, and he took them all and made them his own and sort of repackaged it and made it this. He was like, boom, this is it. Here we go. This is it.
I mean, the guy, again, couldn't stop playing and recording. I mean, hundreds of hours of tape that came out after he died of him jamming with everybody, of playing about in the studio. Again, a production mind, like Buddy Holly. He knew how to create a sound, produce it. I mean, who knows what he could have done if he'd lived. I mean, imagine him playing with Prince and guys like that. And
Miles Davis. I think they were going to do something together.
Yeah, and he's a guy
that would have been
could do anything. Yeah, a guy like Hendrix could do anything. But him and Miles Davis would have been.
Yeah, they were planning on making an album together. They had been talking.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, I had a conversation this morning with a Canadian musician that I got introduced to, a guy called Greg Godovitz. Big history in Canadian bands over the years, but he is a very good friend of Eddie Kramer, who was the engineer on all these albums. Still is a very good friend with him. So that was a very fascinating conversation I had about that. So looking forward to chatting to Greg more about that. Maybe even talking to Eddie one day.
I was lucky enough to have an appreciation for Jimi Hendrix because I grew up through Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
And that's what I grew up with. Well, believe it or not, I started with Kiss, of all things, when I was little. Well, but I heard Led Zeppelin because my brother was playing it, and I'm like, I want that. That's what I want to listen to. So, but having that blues sound already influent in my head, I was able to listen to Jimmy and hear those influences and know where it comes from.
Indeed. So yeah, Godot. If you know your hard rock trios from the 70s, Godot were a Canadian hard rock trio, and they did some pretty damn good stuff. Greg was the bass player and vocalist, so I was having a nice chat with him this morning. Yeah, well, because for all their faults, they certainly had a certain. They knew how to write a straight-ahead rock anthem, and they had theatricality. I wouldn't certainly include them in my top.
Best thing that come out of Canada was Triumph.
Well, Greg has played with the guys from Triumph many times in different bands.
There you
go. But yeah, Godot, I think for me are better than Triumph, but that's just me. Not as good as Rush, though.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I respectfully disagree. The best thing to come out of Canada is Rush.
See, I like Rush, but I like Triumph.
Oh, Rush are the guys.
That kind of stuff.
I'd have to
Magic Power is one of my favorite songs ever.
Sorry, Anthony, what were you?
Oh, I was going to say, for me, it would probably be Leonard Cohen.
Well, indeed. So you have many. I mean, we only barely touched on the metal and rock stuff. Obviously, Hendrix was one of those things, but Leonard Cohen you mentioned as one of your influences from Montreal, of course. Yes. I actually knew some guys. My older friend and my older brother, when I was a kid in Edinburgh, who went to see Leonard Cohen playing at the Edinburgh Playhouse, and he said for the first 10 minutes he thought it was the janitor that was playing. He didn't realize that was actually Leonard Cohen. He thought the janitor had come on because he was so scruffy looking and just.
Yeah.
So what do you like about Leonard Cohen?
Well, like him and other songwriters, music as a I guess as a field of, I guess, science or logic or something that you can get better at. You can see progress. Songwriting is not something you can do that. I mean, you can see progress, but it's nothing that's just so easily tangible. The progress isn't tangible. I can sit in my room and practice piano for 6 hours and probably get better. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be able to do that with songwriting, because songwriting is just it's a different animal. And I have a really great admiration for people that aren't necessarily great musicians and maybe don't even know anything about music, but they can still somehow write brilliant lyrics and then marry them with music in a way that is powerful without being really aware of it. And Leonard Cohen is one of those people that I think maybe one of the few people that has ever done that.
Well, we all know the song Hallelujah, of course, which is an incredible lyric when you listen to it.
That's a great song. He's got a lot of other wonderful songs, but I think he's one of those people, like I was talking about earlier, that when you go down into, I guess he really struggled with the process. Somebody like Bob Dylan, for example, who y'all mentioned earlier, the lyrics came to him very easily and very freely, and the muse was there almost, just whenever he wanted it to be there. For Leonard Cohen, I would compare Bob Dylan to someone like Mozart, who they composed so freely, and so they were just very angelic in their composition. And I would compare someone like Leonard Cohen to Beethoven, who really struggled with it. They really showed their humanity, but what came out of it, they really struggled, and their output wasn't as prolific, and there wasn't such a great body of work necessarily, maybe, but the quality of what they did create was very heartfelt and came from a place of vulnerability.
Yeah, Leonard Cohen particularly had struggled with a number of things over the years, ended up living in a monastery, I believe, for a number of years, and then unfortunately got ripped off by his publisher and had to come back out of retirement and start playing again. So he didn't have an easy run of it, but from Montreal, where my wife is from.
Oh, yeah.
Our hometown, yeah. So... it's certainly, as a song, I can see as a songwriter, I've never particularly enjoyed Leonard Cohen as an artist, but as a performer, but as a songwriter, his songs covered by other people have been really good.
Well, and like you said, a lot of his songs, like the production, his albums are really bad. He kind of sounds like a washed up lounge singer, singing along to a Casio on some of his albums. But then
I've got to clip that bit. Hang on, how far into the show are we? That's going to be a clip.
But then you take. I'm not talking about his abilities. I'm talking about just the production choices, But when you take his songs and his lyrics and his melodies and his chords, and you have maybe somebody else do them sometimes.
First, we take Manhattan, all that kind of thing.
I mean, there's Everybody Knows. There's a song called Everybody Knows that's like kind of similar production, but the words are just like, man, I mean, just really powerful words. But his early stuff, like Famous Blue Raincoat, like That's No Way to Say Goodbye, like all the early stuff where he's playing. I also like the fact that he plays the classical guitar. And he has this really wonderful picking style, and he's a competent guitar player. He's really
and he made no concessions to rock either. I mean, he was purely singer-songwriter. I don't think he ever made any concessions to any kind of rock trappings, like some of the other singer-songwriters like James Taylor or Joni Mitchell may have kind of gone there occasionally. I don't think he ever did. He stuck to his craft.
Yeah, and like someone like Joni Mitchell went really deep into even making some albums with top jazz players, like with Pat Metheny and Jaco Pastorius and all those guys. And
you mentioned Jaco Pastorius. Another guy you love in the singer-songwriter vein, though, and more of a country guy, I guess, than Leonard Cohen, is the sadly no longer with us Townes Van Zandt.
Yeah, he's like Edgar Allan Poe, and like, I don't know, he's like and is just like some kind of troubadour or some Texas troubadour that just sings these really dark songs. And the thing I love about Townes is that he's obviously his lyrics, he's just a very clever person. His lyrics are very powerful and his songs are very powerful. He's also one of those guys who's an unassuming guitar player. He's underrated. He has a great finger style. And he's just one of those artists that you look at and his life is just chaos, falling apart. He's an alcoholic. He's just falling apart at the seams. His relationships are terrible. I mean, he's just this disaster, just walking around. But then he gets on stage.
What is it with alcoholics being able to just write the most passionate stuff? It's crazy. Authors, musicians, indeed. All of them do.
But that's crazy. How I look at Townes. That's how I look at Leonard Cohen. They're both authors. They're both these writers. They're writers who play. They're writers who happen to play music and sing. And one of the great things I love about Townes that's particularly evident in this album called Live at the Old Quarter, which is a double album that he recorded live in Houston. He has these very dark, personal, very sad, tragic songs that just make you want to cry. Just really, he was very sad. He didn't hide that.
Hmm.
In fact, he criticized people for like trying to pretend like things were okay. I mean, he's just a very sad person. But he would play these songs in front of a live audience, and then he would just crack these dad jokes in between each song. They're hilarious. He's hilarious, and the whole place would just die. I mean, he would just tell like a one-liner, and the whole place would die laughing. And as the laughter is dying, he goes into his next like really
like tears of a clown almost.
He was a very funny guy, and you'll hear him tell these stories that are just actual things that happened to him and that he went through. How he lost a tooth, had to pull out one of his gold teeth because he lost it in gambling, like that kind of thing, you know. And he's telling these stories about how he found this dentist, and just happened to be there in the audience tonight. Thanks for being here tonight. You know,
the whole dental rock genre has just been invented.
Right.
So I see him as a kind of a successor to Hank Williams in that lielineage of sad,
lonesome songwriters.
The thing about Townes too. So he lived in Austin in the 70s. He was here around the time Willie was starting out the outlaw country, or the whole 4th of July picnics kind of thing out in Dripping Springs. But so Townes Van Zandt had a song called Poncho and Lefty, which is a fantastic song. It's one of my favorite songs.
Oh, yeah.
Joni Mitchell covered that, didn't she? Or was it Joni Mitchell? No, Emily Harris.
Probably Emily Harris.
One of those girls. Yeah.
Willie's sung it before, hasn't he?
The first cover that made that song famous was Merle Haggard and Willie Nelson.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So when Townes incidentally got a very large royalty check from that song. The thing about Townes is that he came from a prominent Texas family. There's a county up near Fort Worth that's named Van Zandt County. He came from his family were lawyers and attorneys and very prominent people. So he kind of rejected that somehow subtly. You know, he he was in a frat for a while. I think he even tried to go to the military for a little bit. And he just kind of rejected all that and just he chose a life of a troubadour, of a vagabond. And when he got the check, he cashed the check, the royalty check that he got, and he took a taxi around Austin and just started throwing $100 bills out to the homeless people.
My God! Wow.
And he also, another thing that happened to him during that time was that he was becoming this like really powerful cult figure, this powerful this underground songwriter, this underground genius. People were calling him the next Dylan, and Dylan actually wrote him to make an album. He tried to meet him in Austin, and Townes was just like, I don't really like your celebrity status. I don't really want to make an album with you.
Wow.
And he just Dylan was like, oh.
It's like telling Frank Sinatra to stop bothering you when you're with a girl.
Stop bothering me. I know you're the boss and everything, but damn.
But if you watch any of Townes' documentaries, he's just like there's one documentary that's fantastic. It's called Be Here to Love Me. And at the beginning of it, he's just like, he's drunk, he's smoking a cigarette, he's got on this corduroy jacket that has like some kind of like fabric over it, and he's got his cowboy hat on, and he's got a shotgun there. He's like, all right, I'm gonna try to hit that. They're shooting to, I mean, he's just like drunk, pointing that gun everywhere and just talking.
Wow.
I mean,
people are just sitting around just like drinking.
Is there anything more Texan than that? I don't know. It sounds pretty Texan to me.
It does.
And then cut to him singing "Waiting Around to Die," one of his most famous songs, in the living room with his friends. And like, it's just his music as a character, he's so powerful. And
it's almost
an enigma,
almost a character outside of himself in a way, even though that was the real him. It's weird, isn't it? I want to play a little clip of you playing one of his songs. This is Our Mother of the Mountain.
Oh yes, this is a fantastic song. This is Edgar Allan Poe for sure, like a very Poe influenced lyric, I think.
Yeah, just a little clip of that.
My lover comes to me with a rose on her bosom, moves down circle all through black hair. Ladies in waiting, she stands neath my window. Sun will rise soon on the falls and fair. Singing lie. She tells me she comes from our mother the mountain. Her skin is too tight and her lips not light. Silently slips from her throat a medallion, slowly she twirls it in front of my eyes, singing to little I-O. Watch her.
So just a little clip of you playing that Townes Van Zandt song, and you can hear the melancholy.
Yeah.
In it. And also it's very, I mean, I like that one because it's kind of it's very rural. It's a rural lifestyle, rural family, a story of a rural community. It's something very beautiful about that one. Yeah.
I've always thought that artists like him are just too empathetic. They feel too much, and they drown it in whiskey, and they pour it out in the music, and it's really it's captivating to listen to. It really is.
It is.
One of the reasons I love being on this show is I always come across a new artist that either Brian or one of the guests have introduced me to. I'd never heard of Townes Van Zandt. Yeah. That's not the Van Zandt brothers. I'm aware of.
Not Skinner, no.
Not Skinner, not 38 Special.
Oh, no.
Play some Skinner. That's a guy.
Now I've got a new artist to go find and discover, and that's one of the things I love about this. So I just want to throw that out there.
Oh yeah, cool.
Yeah, we try to do that in the show. You know, we poke around in the corners and find stuff. And thank you, Anthony, for mentioning and bringing up Townes Van Zandt.
Yeah, man.
Artists we've not talked about. And I do. He is a great guy to emulate as a songwriter, but maybe not the lifestyle.
Man, I'll tell you this. About 8 years ago, I was really definitely trying to emulate his lifestyle.
Oh, you're right. Okay.
Man, I
well, you have
really
a beautiful lady with you now, so
yeah. So I had some dark nights with a lot of alcohol. So
yeah. Well, you can still call on that when you're writing, though. You can still go back and call. But what about the chicken suit, though? We never talked about the chicken suit.
Chicken suit.
Kerry said something about getting to talk about the chicken suit.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. I thought you guys talked about it when I got up to talk to my wife.
Elton John, I don't know if it is.
There was a time when Johnny Cash, they thought it was a good idea for him to wear a chicken suit. He did a song about. I don't really remember. I kind of blocked that part out. I was reading that in the book, and
I should mention before we've got a couple more things I want to talk about before we wrap the show up. But one thing I was supposed to mention was that you have a deep love for avocados, I believe.
No, I don't. That must have been. I see that you and Carrie have been talking behind my back.
They're trolling him. Okay. Don't do that.
I'm not a fan of avocados, but what's weirder, not liking avocados or not liking bacon?
Oh,
that's weird.
Bacon. Come on, you must like. Who doesn't like bacon?
Not liking bacon is just strange.
Since we all agree that not liking bacon is weirder, we can all.
So Carrie doesn't like bacon.
She does. She hates bacon.
Sick woman.
Carrie,
I've never heard of jalapenos wrapped in avocado. I've never heard of deep fried. I guess I've heard of avocado burgers.
You may know this, Anthony, but when I lived in Dallas, I used to go to the Beer and Bacon Festival every year.
Woo!
Have you ever been to Beer?
There's a lot of guys at that show.
You've no idea how many ways there is to cook bacon until you go to the Beer and Bacon Festival.
Dang, man. I love bacon.
Well, who doesn't love only a weird person wouldn't like bacon.
Thank you for thank you for articulating my emotions.
Your deepest fears. I did want to touch on one artist I had never heard of that you mentioned, and I did go look him up, and he's extremely eclectic. It's a guy called Wayne Krantz.
Yeah.
Now, this guy, I would describe him as jazz. It's jazz.
Yeah. So I don't want to get too far into left field for anybody who's not really into this kind of music, but so the way I heard, Wayne Krantz is a jazz guitar player. He's a bebop. He studied, what is almost like the classical music of jazz, which was the bebop era, which is the proper way to kind of play jazz. But he's much more than that. And like I said, I believe in my message that he's one of these people that reinvented the wheel for me. I used to live in New York City, and there's a bar in the West Village called the 55 Bar, and Wayne Krantz and his trio would play there every Thursday night for $5, and they'd pack it. They'd do 2 sets, and they'd pack it every set. And I'd pay $5 and get a beer and sit at his feet. And It's not just his playing, because his philosophy of playing is not just licks, although he's very capable of playing a bunch of licks and craziness. But it's the band that he plays with, and he has a drummer named Keith Carlock. And on this particular album that I was talking to you about, there's a bass player named Tim Lefebvre. And yes, so Davina says Wayne Krantz played with Steely Dan. Yes, that's right. So he has toured with Steely Dan. Keith Carlock, the drummer, also played with Steely Dan. He toured with Sting. It was so funny. They were on break and we were outside talking, and my drummer was with me. He was like, "Hey, you mind if could I ever take a lesson with you sometime?" And Keith Carlock was like, "Yeah, dude, of course, for sure. Let me just check my." I'm actually going on the road with Sting next week, but maybe the week after that I'll be back in town. I was like,
Steely Dan's one of my favorite bands. So.
After you get back, and Steely Dan, and
if these guys are hanging out with Steely Dan, then I'm into it. Yeah.
He's I guess at this particular point in I guess in time, which was around 2001, 2002 in New York, there was this movement starting with these guitar players who would play these trios, and they would start with a groove that was kind of like the meters, if you know the meters. Almost like, let's just imagine it was like only James Brown's rhythm section, but maybe a little looser, like the Meters Brothers, like a funk groove with a couple of like guitar licks from a very, very capable guitar player. All three of the musicians are very capable of just going off on their own as a soloist, but they choose in that moment to stay kind of to groove as a unit. Then the groove would change to maybe something twice as fast, 3 times as fast, with a completely different feel, with licks that went together. But it wasn't so much like you would hear like a Dave Weckl play, or you wouldn't hear like a Chick Corea like big band or Chick Corea electric band or something like that. It was much more organic. It was much more. He played Wayne Krantz plays a Strat, so he kind of has that Hendrix sound, almost like a rock sound. He has a real rock and roll sound. And this particular album called 2 Drink Minimum is it's really one. I think it would be probably the best album to listen to of his. But he's one of those that just really like, much like I was talking about Randy Rhoads before, his sound and his feel in this live recording from Live at 55. It's the same. It's very powerful. His sound, it lasts.
Well, I started looking at some of his stuff on YouTube when you mentioned him, and it goes way back. I mean, he's been around for a while. It's an incredible variety of styles he can play, but some of it is exceptionally fluid jazz, just incredible.
I mean, he's a guitarist. I mean, there's probably nothing he can't play.
The only guy I could think of, although he's not necessarily exactly the same as a Jeff Beck in terms of quality.
I would say that Wayne Krantz probably has more of a jazz element to Jeff Beck, but it's the same sound, same feel, same kind of almost perfect kind of playing, but still. It still breathes and shows the cracks a little bit. You know what I mean? It shows the vulnerability. You can feel when like Jeff Beck's playing, he's so perfect and his sound is so perfect and his licks are so perfect, but you can still feel him stretch. You know, it's not so polished. It's like there's a vulnerability in his playing that really you can really identify with as a listener. Wayne Krantz is the same way, you know.
Yeah. No, I urge people to check him out on YouTube. I've been watching some of his stuff and it's incredible. I mean, it's jaw-dropping virtuosity, yet in this very intimate setting usually. Yeah. I mean, he's playing in high school gymnasiums and
but like I was saying, I mean, equally, if not more important, are the drummer and the bass player, Tim Lefebvre and Keith Carlock. Man, those guys are just, and Tim Lefebvre's bass lines, I mean, they're not even, it's just this washy kind of like presence behind. It's like, whoa.
Well, we didn't even.
That just makes so much sense. Makes perfect sense.
Well, you mentioned a bass player. We haven't even. We're running out of time, unfortunately, to talk about the stuff like Jaco Pastorius, Weather Report. That bass playing.
Yeah, Jaco, man. Yeah.
No frets, and
Well, he pulled the frets out. You know, he was kind of had a mental disorder, and he thought it would be a good idea before a show to pull out the frets with pliers on his bass, and then he put surfboard wax over it, and that he basically created the fretless bass stuff.
Yeah,
but the great thing about Jaco, and I would highly encourage anyone to read about him, his biography, is that he was he was like Mingus. He was like Charles Mingus. He wasn't just a bassist. He wasn't just a bass player. That was like, although he was the greatest bass player in his own words, he was the greatest bass player in the world, which he was. He was a composer. He was an arranger. He was a band leader. And you can hear his live recordings of his full. He played bass in Weather Report. And Weather Report's fantastic too. JoesAtmosfere,
jazz funk band, yeah.
Wayne Shorter. Again, another live recording that I would really encourage everyone to listen to is his 30th birthday concert. It was he achieved rock star status in the 70s as a bass player in a funk band.
I mean, as a rock fan, I'd heard of him.
Mm-hmm. You know? So he achieved this status, just climbed from basically the bottom rungs of playing funk and just kind of wrote letters to Joe Zawinul, the leader of Weather Report, when they were looking for a bass player. Just kept pestering him, got into the band, and then he became the star of the band. After he reached this superstardom, he went back on his 30th birthday to Fort Lauderdale, where he's from, and he did this big band concert with 5 saxophones, 5 trombones, 5 trumpets, a rhythm section, and he conducted the band with his compositions while he was playing the bass in front of all his friends and family, his mom, and everybody's there, and it's a live recording. Peter Erskine's playing drums. It's a fantastic album. But the funny thing about the wonderful thing about Jaco, one of his best quotes, is that he had manic phases. I guess he was borderline personality or manic depressive. It's sad, and he died very young. He died tragically. He was beaten to death by the bouncer at a bar because he mouthed off to the wrong guy. He was on coke. He was unmedicated on cocaine. He was alcoholic towards the end of his life. He was homeless. It's a very, very sad story. Again, he was creating this incredibly beautiful music at a high level, at a genius level. This is like Mozart level of music. One of the great quotes is that he was talking to somebody in New York in the 70s, and he pointed at the Twin Towers, and he's like, "Me and Jimi Hendrix built the Twin Towers." he set up his amp on West 4th Street and Broadway in the Village, in the basketball courts, because he was a huge basketball. He loved basketball, loved to play basketball, and he would just sit there and play bass. He played "America the Beautiful," which was his signature. But he'd just sit there and play this slap funk bass, all these crazy lines, harmonics. He would do all these. He had these huge hands and double jointed thumbs, so he could do these crazy like chords on the bass that nobody was doing at the time. And people would just come around and listen to him play, and he'd be like, "Me and Jimi Hendrix built the Twin Towers."
One of the things I read about him that people would say is they didn't realize there wasn't a keyboard player in these bands sometimes.
Yeah, because
he played so much harmonies on the bass.
Yeah.
Wow. That it sounded like there was someone playing a keyboard
and harmonics, and he would do all these things. So he played with Joni Mitchell. They did Joni Mitchell hired him. She hired Pat Metheny, who's also just another level guitar player. Yeah. Peter Erskine playing bass. I can't remember who was. I think Bob Berg was playing saxophone. But there's an album called Shadows and Light by Joni Mitchell, and it's all her. It's a double live album. I guess I like live albums, but it's a double live album, and it's that band backing up Joni Mitchell on her songs, and everybody gets and all the musicians get a solo spotlight. It's just, I mean, that's one of those albums, It
is a different world. I mean, I can't say that's stuff that I've ever been heavily into, but it's an entire different world of virtuosity. Yeah. The gateway for me into that stuff would be like a Steely Dan, and that got me interested in some jazz like Miles Davis, and then but these guys are on a different planet.
Yeah,
like Pistorius, different planet entirely, and I guess it's something to aspire to. But thank you for sharing all those things that you like with us, because that's been a very different set of stuff. I really appreciate that, Anthony. Thank you.
Yeah, thank y'all for having me on and letting me talk about it.
I want to play before we wrap up, and we just take another quick look at your stuff. I wanted to play one more clip of you. It's one of my favorite clips of you from your YouTube site of you playing live. One of my favorite songs. It's not the whole 10 minutes. I've done a little montage, but this is your version of Bésame Mucho. Which
do you have? Are you playing the clip that you sent me?
No, that was the montage. This is a montage of you playing Best of Me Mucho. That was a montage of other things.
Oh, I was gonna say if you could play the drum solo, if you could play around the drum solo, that drummer is like, I don't know if you have it clipped up or queued up or not. But
I do have it. I could work my way through it. I'll play this and then I'll look for that because I clipped it and I just clipped the end of that. I know what you're talking about though.
Yeah, drums is. Y'all got to hear this guy play. He's really good.
Well, I'll find that in a second. Yeah.
Bésame mucho, como si fuera esta noche la última vez. Bésame mucho, que tengo miedo de perderte después. Bésame mucho, como si fuera esta noche la última vez. Bésame mucho, que tengo miedo de perderte después.
Yeah, that's just a little taste of the drumming we got there. I would urge everyone to go to your YouTube page, your YouTube channel, and check the entire. It's like 8-9 minutes, and the drumming, as you say, like there's a couple of minutes of just the drummer, basically doing a solo. It's brilliant. Go check it out.
That whole last section is like gets nuts, like guitar
beautiful.
solo and piano solo and violin and everything.
I love it. It's beautiful, and I love that song. At first, I thought James, the bass player, is James, isn't it? Might have been playing the McCartney bass because the Beatles do a great cover of that on the Decca sessions. The only thing I didn't like about your version is, unlike the Beatles, you didn't go cha-cha boom at the end. But I love that version of it, and beautifully performed by the entire band. Just love it.
Thank you.
So we're going to head towards a wrap up. I just wanted once again to urge everybody to go to Anthony's website, anthonygarciamusic.com, where you'll find all sorts of info about the music, tour dates, etc., contact information. Also, Anthony Garcia Music YouTube channel. You'll find a ton of great performances there by Anthony on his own, by him as a duo, with what was the lady's name again? Megan. Megan. And also the full band playing, and there's some brilliant stuff on there. And the official music videos you made for Devil in My Heart and Santa Rosa. Where was the Devil in My Heart video filmed, that location, by the way?
It's somewhere here in Central Texas, just west of San Antonio, a small, like a kind of a movie set that a friend of mine built, and it was a friend of a friend that owns it. Yeah, it's very cool. It's basically going to be turned into a movie set. They're going to rent it out and charge money, and we got in right at the right time where they were just like, we're not charging people yet, so it's yours for the day. Just go ahead and go in there. So
it's beautiful. It just fitted the song really well, I thought.
Yeah, it's a cool little spot. It's a cool little area. We're very thankful they let us shoot there.
Yeah, so check out, go to iTunes or your favorite music place and get Devil in My Heart, and also the album Acres of Diamonds. I can guarantee you will not be disappointed. fantastic pieces of music, Anthony. Thank you for making them and sharing them with us.
Yeah, man. Thank y'all. I appreciate y'all having me on, and nice meeting all of you.
Yeah. So what? And also I shouldn't forget the upcoming, possibly called guitar album. So look out for that, everybody. I assume it'll be on your website. You'll have some information on that in your Twitter feed. Yeah. And have you got any gigs other than the European gigs planned that you know of, or?
Just here in Central Texas, in the Austin area. We're playing. This weekend I'm doing some just small gigs, and then going to Montana actually again next weekend, playing a wedding up there. I met some folks. I was playing a songwriter festival a couple weeks ago, and there was a father of a bride who was very adamant about me playing at his daughter's wedding. So, so I'm going back up, and then we're playing. I'm playing a full band house concert kind of thing here in Johnson City, which is actually the birthplace of President LBJ. And so playing a house concert there, and then just some smaller events. Nothing too major until we go overseas. Yeah,
well, good luck with the European gigs. I hope they go well.
Thank you.
Hopefully you'll want to come back and talk again sometime.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I would love to.
We barely scratched the surface.
Yeah, I know. I love I miss talking about music with people who are fans of music, and I have a feeling that we all have the same a lot of the same influences, and I have tons of blind spots that I would love to, that I'm not too proud of, but they're there. So.
Oh well, we never even touched hardly on the metal stuff, and we're all metal fans here.
Oh yeah.
So we've done a lot of shows on metal, but we'd love to have you back to talk about that, and maybe after the European gigs, come back and chat to us again.
Absolutely, that'd be awesome.
But yeah, thanks for being on here, mate. Really appreciate it.
All right.
Hope we didn't scare you off, buddy.
Yeah.
No.
I'd like to thank my panelists as usual, Joe, John, the usually silent imp, except if he's complaining about non-metal. No, he's not saying anything. Thank you to the chat. We had a fantastic chat today. I'm sorry I couldn't keep up with everything you were saying. Thanks for the super chats, guys, that did them. Thank you very much to our mods, Davina and Lord Thoth and D-Bud. But yeah, to everybody, Kerry for popping into the chat. Brahma was here. Thank you, everyone that was in there. Too many to mention. My brother, great internet brother, Darius Münchausen, who was having connection problems. Otherwise, he would have been with us. And that man knows some weird music.
He does. Yeah, he does.
Christian Delorme, my great friend from Ottawa. Good to see you, buddy. Davina, Darth Scipio, WG. Yeah, so many. And please leave a like, share the stream out so people can see it in replay. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I'd be super grateful if you did. I appreciate it very much. We're helping to grow and we're having some fun. So until next time, and who knows what we're going to do next week. May not even be music. I'm thinking it might be a show on SCTV. Canadian comedy show. So
the Canadian Saturday Night Live back in the day.
Possibly. And Thursday on the Rock and Roll Rowdies channel, I host a regular show there now for those guys. Anthony, these are the road managers that I do a lot of shows with, guys that road managed for Genesis, Pink Floyd, Peter Gabriel, you name it. These guys are worked with.
Yeah, Anthony, if you haven't seen this series of things he's doing with them, you need to check them out. Rock and Roll Rowdies, you'll enjoy it.
You name it. Thursday, 1 p.m. Mountain Time on their channel, we're going to talk about some of their first European tours they did back in the day with bands like Vinegar Joe, which was Robert Palmer, and Vandergraaf Generator, and other such obscure bands that they toured Europe with in the early 70s. So, once again, thanks everyone for being here. Thanks to Anthony. Thanks to my panel. Hope you all have a great night, and we'll see you all again very soon. Till next time, keep on rocking. And Anthony, if you can stick around for just a minute after.
Sure.